Okay, let's get started. So first, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We are very pleased to have with us Luciana Silva and Roby Mussi from Chevron, two HR specialists. But before we get into the topic of hand, I just want to get into a few bookkeeping items. First of all, my name is Jordan Van Deen, and joined with me tonight is Jeff Calvert. Jeff Calvert will be my producer for the evening. And so when we get into sort of more of the question and answer period, he'll be going through your guys' reactions. If you can do the hands up or thumbs up if you want to ask a question. If you have a video, if you have a camera and a microphone and want to talk, that'd be great if we can see your get a face shot and hear your voice. If you're not comfortable with that, by all means, use the chat. If you're not talking, if you don't mind just muting your microphones just in case there's any background noises. And I guess the biggest point of the evening is that this session is for you guys. We have two wonderful guests with us. Roby, who's helped us in the past before. The mentees back then really appreciated his insight into sort of the HR space. Luciana, she's sort of cutting her teeth in that space now. And I'm sure she has a lot of knowledge and different perspectives than Roby. So unless there's any further ado, I'll just do just more detailed introduction. So Roby, 10 years experience as a human resources professional. He's been with multiple outfits, but spent the last 6 years with Chevron. And he has completed his Bachelor of Arts from the University of Calgary in Law and Society. As I mentioned, Luciana, new to HR. She's in an 8th-month work term with Chevron. She was previously with CNOC, and she's doing a double major in human resources and international relations. And we thought it would be fun as a sort of a warm-up to give both Roby and Luciana, a couple minutes just to tell a story about themselves, just so you can get more perspective onto their personalities, and just a bit of an icebreaker. So Luciana, if you want to start, if you want to tell us the story about yourself.
Sure. Okay. Thanks for the introduction, Jordan. So I guess the story that I kind of wanted to talk about, we were kind of told to share an embarrassing story, but I decided to take this a little bit of a different route. So a couple years ago, I had the opportunity through the U of C to go on this backpacking trip. It was a 5-day backpacking trip, 4 course credit. If you happen to be a student at the University of Calgary, I would highly recommend it. So we were out there in teams of 6, along with a guide and a prof, but they weren't actually doing anything. I guess they were just making sure that, we were safe. But this was really a course that was focused around leadership. And so every person on the team got the chance to hold the compass, hold the map, knowing absolutely nothing about, orienteering or navigating, and just leading the group through Kananaskis backcountry. So every day, we would wake up and do anywhere between like 5 and 10 kilometers with 40 pounds on our backs. And there was this one group member who was always playing devil's advocate. So every time anyone would make a decision, this group member would say, well, no, how about this? We need to look at this instead. And let's say the rest of the group got pretty fed up with it. This is supposed to be a course about leadership and team dynamics, and he really wasn't letting the leader lead. So we came up to the last day that we were hiking, and we set off the leader in front, and this team member would say, hey, no, how about this? And the rest of us shut him down, and we said, hey, you know what, today, like, you're not doing this today. Like, let them do their job. We're tired of you. And we hike and we hike, and he tries to speak up, and we shut him down, and we keep hiking and hiking. And now the sun's going down, and we're still not really where we're supposed to be. And it actually got to the point where the instructor had to stop us because we were about to go off of a cliff, huge cliff, waterfall underneath. We could not go down. And he kind of sat us down and said, hey, look, like, you guys should have been listening to him, because he was right. If you had gone the way that he told you to go, maybe 30 minutes into the day, you would have had a 3-hour hike, which had now become an 8-hour hike. And by the time we got to our camp, we were absolutely, bloody, broken, exhausted, all because we didn't listen to this team member. And I think that was probably the biggest learning of this entire backpacking trip for me, which is it's really important to listen to your team members, you know, even if they're not the most personable, even if they get on your nerves. It was just a really great learning experience that could have saved us a lot of time if we had, you know, just listened to our group member. So that was my super awesome backpacking trip. And honestly, it was a great learning and a great time.
And that also seems like it's going to be applicable in the workplace as well. Sometimes you'll have team members that you might not necessarily want to work with, but they do have valuable input to provide. So thank you for sharing that story with us. Robbie, what would you like to tell us your story?
Absolutely. So I have an embarrassing story. I went down the embarrassing story route. So thank you, Luciana, for taking the lessons learned story. So I'm going to share with you, and I'm going to, you know, before I get into the embarrassing part, I'll give you some background to it. So this is when I first interviewed with Chevron. I just completed a panel interview. Most likely, I think there were 5 panelists, and I was the individual getting interviewed. Successfully completed that. Got invited to do the informal coffee meeting with 3 of them. Went and did that. Didn't hear back from Chevron for 3 weeks after that informal, to which point I thought to myself, how did I mess up the informal coffee meeting? I'm supposed to do really good at that. That is me in a nutshell. And I got invited to go and meet with the HR manager as my 3rd and final interview. And I was working at the time for a company. I didn't tell them I was interviewing with Chevron. And so I booked my interview for 6 o'clock in the evening. It was like a Tuesday. And it's middle of February. And it just so happened that my employer at the time booked an impromptu meeting at 5 to 5:30 with myself. So there I am sitting in the meeting, counting down the minutes, thinking to myself, I have a half an hour to now make it across town for my interview with Chevron. So sure enough, meeting ends, have 30 minutes, and I sprint. And for those that know Calgary, I'm on 8th and 8th, just above Modern Jelly Donuts, like outside in Beltline. And I run to the Chevron building, which is like on 5th and 6th, a number of blocks. Make it maybe 2 or 3 minutes right before my meeting starts. Manager comes and greets me. And as he's greeting me, I am drenched in sweat. Like I'm talking like I am not, and I don't stop sweating for the first 20 minutes of this meeting. And I'm out of breath for at least the first 30 minutes, to the point where every question he asks me, my hands are on my hips, on my knees. I'm giving him the, 1 second here. Like I just need to catch my breath. And that is, one of the more embarrassing things, because I really look forward to interviews, and that was me completely, not bringing my best self to an interview. Thankfully, the next time I seen him, after they hired me, he got to see my true self, the non-sweaty, non-out-of-breath person. But what I hope most of you all take from that story is we all like to envision that we are going to have a perfect interview. Been doing it for about 10 years now. Never seen a perfect interview yet. So there's no such thing. And so that is my embarrassing story.
That's a pretty good one. So I have to ask, do you do like any fitness training now to exercise this, to be prepared for any future interview situations like that?
I do training, but I still think even in today's world, I'll still show up to that out of breath and sweaty. So
excellent. Unfortunately, my second monitor just turned off, but I wanted to get sort of the creative juices flowing, get you guys thinking about some good questions to ask our wonderful hosts. And so I'll kick it off, and this one's very topical. We do have a pandemic going on. There's a lot of new virtual calls. These are new procedures and stuff that, a lot of us aren't used to in the past, any part-time jobs or full-time jobs we've had in the past. Either of you can answer this. Maybe tell us from your point of view how things have changed on your end. And either of you take the lead on this one.
So we're talking about COVID and the interview process. Is that correct, Jordan?
Yes, correct. Sorry if I didn't clarify. Just how has it changed from the human resources perspective? Like what procedures have changed?
Yeah, for sure. So I wouldn't say that too much has changed per se. Obviously, the biggest change in the recruitment process this year was that it was completely virtual. All of our intern recruiting was done through WebEx. And obviously, there's kind of a few technical difficulties here and there. I think overall it went pretty well. Video interviews is something that's kind of already used in the industry and in other industries for intern hiring if interns are out of town. But obviously, this was the first year that we kind of took it all virtual and all online.
And was it many like growing pains or from your end? Have you used video interviews in the past before Chevron?
So prior to Chevron, yes, I actually did use video interviews. So for our, long distance candidates, and we also used video pre-screening. This was Robbie's first time doing the video interview process though, so it was definitely a bigger learning curve for him. And there's, quite a few pros and cons in my opinion. So flexibility is one, you don't have to get super dressed up and leave your house and head down to the office. One thing that we found really beneficial this year was from kind of our end, because Chevron recruits with selection committees, so 2 or more diverse employees that are sitting in. And when we conduct the interviews virtually, there isn't really that chance to kind of talk and create, potential for bias or hear what other people think about the candidates. And we think in that way, it really did actually make the process, less bias overall. And we're really able to focus on the content of the interviews.
That's very interesting. And so, Robbie, from your perspective, after probably being in a similar routine for the last 6 years with Chevron, how was that, those growing pains for you?
So for me, it was adapting. So Luciana alluded to it. I am an individual. So I like to do paper interview guides. I like to take handwritten notes, make eye contact with candidates during the interview process. And this year was a little bit more challenging. I was flipping between different programs, one where I'm taking the notes, the other one where I'm asking the questions, the other one a small camera view. And so it was a little bit more challenging for me to get that engagement. What I really had to just focus on was making sure that I was, I want to take diligent notes, but I also wanted to make myself available and visible throughout the interview process. And then the other big piece that I noticed for myself this year is, so we like to conduct operational excellence moments. Usually we go through like building evacuation procedures or stuff like that with candidates when they enter the building, something to get them comfortable. So it was a moment, how do you kick off the interview, but you get each candidate in a moment where they're comfortable to start talking about their background. So what we really used as our OE moment was technology. There will be a chance at one point in this interview where, my audio will get interfered and you won't understand me, or vice versa, or I might drop off the call. And so interviews are already nervous as it is. You don't really need technology to be, an added stressor. So we really just wanted to set people's their expectations and their stresses at ease to say, hey, we're all working through this. You drop off the call, take 4 deep breaths, and we'll figure this out.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thanks for answering that question. Jeff, my producer, do we have anything from our audience? Any questions yet?
No, not yet. Just to remind everybody, if you're too shy to ask a question, you can always type it in the group chat, and we'll make sure to follow up with that. So, yeah, it's about getting interactive. Or if you have a question you want to ask vocally, I think now is a good chance.
Yeah, we would love it if you can turn your camera on and turn on the microphone to ask a question. My second monitor is turned off, and that's where I had all my cheat sheets.
And we won't judge you if you are in your pajamas, because that's okay. You're at home now. You're allowed to be.
I seen Mateo's screen go on a couple times. I don't know if Mateo had a question or if he
Screaming for help.
Do you guys hear me?
Yep.
Oh, sweet. Sorry, I'm just like in the car, so I didn't know my mic was working. But I had a question about in terms of like LinkedIn and like, do you guys see any importance with it rising now that everything's kind of shifting more digital? Like, would having a well laid out LinkedIn give I guess students or anyone looking for jobs a competitive edge? I don't know if you guys have any experience with that or any knowledge.
I mean,
And like, if so, like, is there something to keep in mind when we're making our LinkedIn profiles?
I guess I can start, and Robbie, maybe you can wrap up my answers a little bit shorter. Personally, when I'm recruiting, shortlisting, looking through resumes, even at the interview stage, I don't tend to look at LinkedIn. I tend to maybe stick to what the candidate has used in their application package. So I like to spend a little more time looking at the cover letter, resume. If it's a computer science student, I might look at their GitHub, or Google a company that I'm unsure of. But I personally have not used LinkedIn in recruiting.
And so my response is, I'm going to say, I think your reply is A, should I create, should you create a LinkedIn account? And I would always say yes. The premise of why LinkedIn is there created is for you to grow your professional network and to have those opportunities. And then in terms of best practices to have, please make sure that your LinkedIn information is synced with your resume. Oddly enough, sometimes people's information, dates and titles and companies don't really sink in. If someone does a secondary check on yourself, it's always good to make sure that information is verified again. And in terms of connecting with people, I think, it is, in this digital world, it is an opportunity for you to engage with folks. I think that individuals like yourselves should aim to connect with folks within your function. So connecting with other geologists and geophysicists in your space, because then you can really contribute and add some dialogue. I do find that connecting with HR professionals, if I look at my LinkedIn account, I usually have a backlog in invites, and I usually have a backlog in messages that I don't normally get into. So it's not, I'm probably not the best person. By all means, if anyone at the end of this presentation wants to add me to LinkedIn, feel free to. It just takes me some time to get to them, type of thing. But that kind of would be my response. Okay, hopefully, did that kind of help answer what you were looking for?
Yes, it does. Thank you. It's like a kind of like a gray area right now because I've been hearing like lots of
Sorry, can you repeat that last bit, Mateo?
good takeaways, like making sure the resume is in sync with the LinkedIn, because I know that's something that I'm.
You cut out a little bit there, Mateo, but I think you were just reiterating, just making sure the resume is synced in with your LinkedIn profile. And by all means, like I'll share exactly what I did. I just share my title and company on my LinkedIn account. I don't get into any of the details in terms of my responsibilities in the role. I think that that's my resume. That's what it's there for. But if someone wants to look at it, that's what's really on my LinkedIn profile. And I kind of keep it very simple. And I don't fall. I'll personally critique my LinkedIn account. I don't have a very up-to-date photo of myself. So as well, try to keep it as up-to-date as possible, and all your information. So the other day I was just in my LinkedIn account and I was thinking to myself, I don't volunteer with that organization. It's been 3 years. So it goes to show you like how up-to-date sometimes I keep my stuff. So
You might be disappointed to know that we used your old LinkedIn profile picture for all of our advertising. So maybe that's a bit of a pusher to get you to update that. I did have a bit of a follow-up that's somewhat related. On the social media side, people are tweeting, people are Instagramming. Maybe you don't want to reveal if you look up any type of social media contributions that candidates have. Maybe you'll find something that might not align with the values that Chevron has. Can either of you speak to that?
So this might be, once again, me sharing an embarrassing story. So this is just kind of queuing me up for it.
Perfect.
So I guess my response is I no longer go on social media. And the main reason why is we were actually hiring somebody for my department to report to me at the time. This was before I joined Chevron, so it was the organization prior. And I went to go search them on Facebook before the interview. And given my, I guess, inability to leverage technology, I by accidentally hit the friend button while I was on. And so clearly come the interview time, they're like, well, so you've looked at my Facebook. And I was just like, I was in that awkward moment of the interview where it's like, I feel like I have to hire you now. So that was my lessons learned. So I no longer do that. But LinkedIn I do.
That is a funny story. Luciana, it sounds like you just focus on the qualifications as opposed to the hot gossip, what favorite sports team they listen to or they follow on Instagram or Twitter?
Yeah, I would say I'm definitely on that boat as well. I typically wouldn't look at LinkedIn, even though, I have a LinkedIn profile, and I also try not to go on social media. That being said, everybody knows, just watch what you post on there, especially if if your profile is public, because, it's not so much you can post 100 good things and you post one bad thing. And as you've probably seen in the various scandals, you're out of a job like that.
Yeah, precisely. Excellent.
We have a few more questions on the panel, Jordan. Do you want to do
Sure.
a few more of those?
Yeah, I was gonna pass it back to you, Jeff. What's next? Who do we have next?
We got Cole here, and he was asking specifically about an online interview experience, and if it's okay to share your screen and potentially share some material with the interviewer, whether it's based on a school project maybe, or something on your resume that you want to dive deeper into.
Sure, Luciana, I'll let you answer that one first if you like.
Okay, yeah, no, I honestly don't see a problem with it. I would say that maybe that would aid in some technical questions. I think it's definitely not conventional, given that, if you're in an interview, it's usually a, face-to-face conversation. Although I would imagine that in some technical interviews, there have also been, perhaps a graph or a chart shown to a candidate and they're asked to explain it. So, I don't see why not. I think that could be a really great tool, unconventional, but these are unconventional times.
And I'll just add on. So during the pre-COVID world, it wasn't uncommon for people to leave little pamphlets or project explanations back to the selection committee to review after the interview. That helps explain their background a little bit more, and it gets just added to their candidacy. I always just say, so if it tells a story in a succinct way and you're able to articulate the story you want and you think that the image is going to help, have at it. But by all means, typically, and this is where I'll caution yourself on kind of the piece of sharing. The interview is usually scheduled for an hour. You don't want to hijack the interview by explaining, your technical presentation for 20, 30 minutes, because that's going to kind of more or less upset the folks who want to interview, because they have a set of questions that they want to go through. So if you have quick images that will help you explain, have at her. Of course, don't try to hijack the meeting. And the real difficult thing I'll caution everyone for is this is stuff that you're passionate about. So it's hard not to get caught up into it and spend 10, 15 minutes in it because you like it and you're passionate about it. So this is where I know specifically earth scientists can get quite passionate in their work. So that'll be my one word of caution.
Excellent. And I think that's a very important point to make. You have your specific set of questions that you like to ask your candidates. And so you're trying to get to the bottom of that. Jeff, do we have anyone else with some questions? I think I see a hand up.
We have a couple of questions in the channel here. How about we got a question from Allie and asking about resume advice for a third-year student, and maybe you can speak about what if you're applying for a position which you don't necessarily have direct industry experience? How do you portray your technical skill set, and maybe just comment on basic resume etiquette, like how long should a resume be, maybe format principles, things like that.
So I'll jump in on this one. So first off, I'll just say, and this is just for everyone before I give this answer, in no way, shape, or form what I'm about to say should everyone go and reformat and edit their resume. This is just Robbie expressing his opinion based off what he's seen. So my personal preference is chronological order with succinct dates and information in there. I also just enjoy having the education well above work experience. To start off your first little bit of your question though, if you're an individual who has limited experience, what could you do? Leverage your academic background. So you're in school for a reason, you're doing projects specific to the industry and specific to the roles that you're applying for. Make sure that you include, instead of calling it work experience, call it work experience and projects. And then that allows you to indicate and input a little bit more of your academic projects in there, where you're able to display the skills that you're looking to display for the roles that you're seeking. And then the other items I like to see is extracurricular activities. That to me tells me a little bit more about the robust candidate that, you know, outside of the academic world and the professional world, they're doing things within their community. And then my last piece that I will always say is, you know, you don't have to necessarily put, actually I shouldn't say my last piece. You don't have to list your references, contact information. You can do the references available on request, or you can just leave that piece out, employers know. And then I'm not sure if there's any international students on the call or not, but I'd also say a typical international CV will have either a picture of them and provide their family status and their marital status, et cetera. And so for a North American resume, please do not have that information on there. It's not deemed required in a North American application. So I'll make that comment. Luciana, you might have more to comment on.
Yeah, for sure. So Robbie and I are probably very kind of different in how we approach resumes. So for me, you know, I'm looking for a clean resume, neatly organized. Grammar is pretty important to me as well. I like to see quantitative details in your work experience, or, you know, extracurricular experience, project experience, that kind of thing. I would also say, you know, if you don't necessarily have that work experience, as Robbie was kind of saying, the extracurriculars, especially if you can show leadership. So you're, you know, a student club president, or for myself, prior to getting my first internship with CDOC, I volunteered weekly at an HR office, just doing, you know, administrative type stuff. But at least you can kind of put that on there and say, hey, you know, I've kind of started to dive into this. So that's just one way if you don't have, you know, the previous internship experience.
Wonderful. I just wanted to clarify a bit from your explanation, Robbie. So if I was applying internationally, should I write on my resume that I am a single fellow with 3 cats, just so they are aware? Or, like, is that normal? That's common? Not that I have 3 cats, I'm just saying.
Yeah. I find it is, so I find, in particular in European resumes and South American resumes, you typically see that statement, those statements being up there. It's interesting, it's in the header of their resume, so immediately you know it's an international resume. I would never indicate my marital status or my family status or my pet status, for that matter. I view that as being personal information. I think if you are applying to international opportunities, you really have to just depend on what companies you're applying for. You know, I think that your more global operators will follow North American principles, but I couldn't tell you what a European operator would do and expect. So, great follow-up question though.
No problem. Jeffrey, who's next on the line?
Looks like we have Dilpreet here with a question.
Dilpreet, if you're willing to say your question, and if you have a video, please go ahead. And if you have a follow-up as well, just so you know you have that opportunity.
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask, are there any things in things that people do in interviews that kind of are like red flags, or things that bother you that candidates like commonly do? Things that we might seem as like harmless or something, but might be, I don't know, like I said, like a red flag for you guys. I don't know, any tips from that perspective?
Yeah, so I got a couple. Luciana, do you want to start? I see we both unmuted at the same time.
Yeah, I guess I can start. So one thing that I guess is a big red flag to me is, you know, I've sat across from students that I was interviewing for, and they looked so bored. You know, they did not look like they wanted to be there. And I don't understand why, when you get to the interview stage, you would look, you know, like you didn't want the job. So I would say it's important to be enthusiastic. It's important to know your stuff. If you start saying that, oh, you've, you know, done some research, you should back that up and not use the very general statements like, oh, I like the culture, or, oh, the assets look great. You actually make sure that you know, do your research and you're able to specify and say company specific things, not just general statements.
All right, and I'll just add a little bit more. And this will be a good point given the audience that we have. a lot of the interviews that you're going to be participating in are either going to be internships or new grad roles. I'm just assuming with the population. And a lot of the questions that are geared towards you, you might reflect on maybe some group projects that you do. And what I really caution everyone is to watch their we's versus I's. And so what we typically find when we are in the interview process, when you ask somebody a question and they're referring to a group project, is we did this, we did that, we did that, we did that, and we got an A. And everyone always thinks that that's the response the interview person is looking for, but really what we're seeking is, well, what did you specifically do on that project? Were you the person responsible for putting the technical report together? Were you presenting? Were you the researcher? What was your specific role? So really just caution and think when you're responding is, what was my role? What was the overall team objective? And how did you participate into arriving to that team objective? That's one of my personal, it's not so much a pet peeve, but it's more of a watch point. And it's not really a red flag. It's just that you seek that information. And unfortunately, if the person doesn't answer it, you move to the next question. You miss out on that opportunity of understanding what that person did. The other things that I'll always say, and perhaps maybe I'm a little old school in this. My mom always taught me, you dress well for the interview. You'd rather show up overdressed than underdressed. So, that has upset me in the past when people show up underdressed. Underdressed for me really means you show up in shorts and it's like, it's a Tuesday morning. You're like, okay, I don't know what to expect here. Stuff like that. People who show up late as well. I usually have like my cutoff point, 15 minutes. After that, I'm looking for quite the reasonable excuse of why you showed up late. Impolite. This is another big one. And I also have to understand that there are cultural norms, but there are at times when I'm doing interviews and people are not being addressed in the interview. And it's typically my female colleagues in the room that are not addressed. That to me is a kind of a red flag. That kind of just might be a cultural barrier there, or it could just be a form of impolite. And then here's what I'll say is, if anytime you're in an interview and someone asks you tell me about a time you made a mistake question, or tell me about a weakness question, and the reply is, I don't have any, or I don't make mistakes, that to me is a massive red flag. Because that right away, I think I normally just like look at my watch and I'm like, well, it's 10 o'clock in the morning on a Wednesday and I've made 3 already today. So how have you not made a mistake yet in your life? Type of thing. So those types of questions are supposed to be queuing you up for, showing your accountability and how did you mitigate it and what can you do to prevent that from happening in the future. And so, a good way to upset a selection committee is not saying you have any. So those would be mine. And that pretty much be kind of, hopefully that helped answer your question.
Excellent. Dilpreet, do you have any follow-ups to that? That sounded like a pretty good explanation to me to your answer.
No, that was,
to your question.
That was great. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. I do want to ask, has anyone ever showed up in a tuxedo and a top hat? Too overdressed?
I've never had a tuxedo, but I've had some people who've worn some nice threads. I will give them that. In fact, I've hired one where he actually said, he's like, I'm pretty sure I dressed all of you times 10 after the fact when we were having beers. And I was like, I do remember the bow tie you had on. And I remember going with, this person is a snazzy dresser. Like, I want to see what they're going to bring every day.
Excellent. You hire him just to get a look at his outfits, eh? Jeff, who do we have next? I have you on mute. I think you're on mute, Jeff.
Oh, you saved.
Oh,
Yeah,
there you
I
go,
had an
Jeff.
issue
All right.
with my monitors. My bad. Ashley has a question regarding work experience. Would you say work experience is more important than education if you're in progress on a resume, or how should you also display those two on a resume? Like, are you going to try to put more importance on that work experience or on that educational experience?
Yeah, and actually, if you have anything you want to add, I noticed you have a camera and a mic as well. So if you want to clarify the question a bit further.
So I didn't get that, Ashley, by the way. I think either your audio or your mute. And I'm just going to give
Yeah.
everyone a quick heads up warning. So we have what is called workplace breaks on our Chevron laptops. And so I'm overdue for about a minute and a half. So if you need to talk to me and I'm on complete mute, it's because I can't log into my computer anymore. It's just frozen for the next minute and a half, FYI. But I can start answering Ashley's question, and then once that break happens, I can stop, hopefully. And actually, I think what your question is maybe in relation to my comment about resumes and following up on your resume and what kind of chronological order should happen. I'm a firm believer, just the way on my personal resume, and just take this is just my thought. I have my education, kind of I have my little introduction statement about myself, and then I have a quick high level capture of my 5 or 6 bullet points on skills, my education, and then my work experience, and then extracurricular activities. That's the chronological order of it. And personally, to answer your question, I put a lot of stock and value in work experience, if someone has it. So I like to see what did they do, what companies were they working for, and what projects were they a part of. And that's where I put a lot of my stock in looking. Now, if someone doesn't have that, that's when I start looking elsewhere in the resume to see what are the other skills that they might have. Luciana.
Yeah, I would absolutely echo that. My resume is built pretty similar. So I've got skills at the top, then I've got my educational credentials, then work experience, and then, extracurricular volunteering at the end. And I'm at about 2 pages. I think Robbie is at 3. If you can fill 3 with great content, do it. If not, keep it to 2 until you have enough work experience. As Robbie has about 10 years of experience. But yeah, as a student, if you have that co-op internship experience, I would put that first. And if you if you don't have the internship experience, but you have, general work experience, retail or what have you, but you also have projects that are more related to the role, I would consider maybe putting those first.
That's excellent. Ashley, if you have a follow-up question, maybe see if your mic is working better. No? Okay, I just saw a head shake no, so we'll go with that. All right, back to the phones. Jeff, who do we have next? Oh, microphone, Jeff.
There you go. It knew and it warned me. We have a question from Fernanda. Let's say you have international work experience. You're applying for a role that is similar. Should you include it, and how much detail should you include? Yeah.
So, trying to think how I can answer this. So, Fernando, when I joined Chevron, being that Chevron is a global operator, international experience and international projects, sorry, are welcome on the resume. So if you can, if you can outline that experience, that's always nice. Don't get into, I would say, don't get into extensive detail. I would try to, during professional career, maybe 4 or 5 bullet points. If it's of course the last role you had and it's completely relevant to the role, put in a couple extra additional bullet points than what I've just originally recommended. I think it's the visibility of relevant experience, and specific. If you can make the jump between what assets were you working on and what projects were you working on, and the similarities between those assets to the company that you're applying for and the assets that their projects are, that will be beneficial. So I'll use an example, but if an Argentinian working in the La Bueca Mortis unconventional asset applied to an opportunity at Chevron, I want to see that unconventional experience on that asset, because we have an unconventional asset here in Canada with Cape. What were the impacts they were able to do on that project? And that to me is experience that is very relevant and very, it's that diversity and inclusion perspective of, it's sometimes really great if you have that transferable skills, specifically from an asset perspective internationally, and you can bring that vision to a Canadian operator. That would be my answer to that.
Luciana, if you have anything to add to that question?
I think that answer was pretty great and comprehensive.
Perfect. I just wanted to make note, we have about 20 minutes left. Robbie and Luciana, they're willing to give an hour of their time. I don't want to push them beyond that. In terms of questions, we'll try to go through at least everyone once if you guys have a question. And by all means, if there's more time, we can start recycling through some of your guys' other questions. So with that, I'll give it back to you, Jeff, if you want to say who's next on the list.
Yeah, I got a question from Jenny. Obviously, when you're in a physical interview, handshakes, eye contact, a lot of these cues are really important for understanding somebody. And obviously, in a virtual interview, you want to do something similar, but you're in a limited circumstance or situation. So, what are some tips in a virtual interview of how to, I guess, give that same message across that you normally would in a physical interview?
I can start with that one. I guess one of the biggest things, virtual interview tips is make sure you understand the software, whether it's Zoom, WebEx, Microsoft Teams. If you're able to log on beforehand to make sure that your sound and your video and all that stuff is working. Definitely sat on a few interviews where, there was a little bit of hiccups with, sound wasn't working, so candidate had to try something else. And, it all worked out in the end, but it's just good to understand the software that you're going to be using. Good internet connection is obviously super important. You want to be able to, have a dialogue and having your camera on as well. We definitely did not mandate that any of our candidates or interviewers, for that matter, had their cameras on, but it really just does improve that face-to-face contact as much as we can in these times. It's really good to, at least be able to see some, nonverbal cues from the candidate and the interviewers alike. And I would say just the last thing is that you probably should refrain from having a second kind of window with your resume or, notes that you're reading off of. I have had that, and we can definitely tell. And that's one of those don'ts that I would say. It just doesn't look great.
So Jenny, I believe you're the one who asked the question. I think great question. I was actually taking answers or notes from Luciana's response there, because I struggle a lot with what you're asking. I'll be transparent with myself. My biggest thing is when I'm in a room, I like to have my head on a swivel and look around at people. And it's very challenging for me to keep my head straight, focused on a camera and keeping eye contact. And I'm sure you've noticed that already today as I've been chatting. My eyes have probably wandered elsewhere. So I find that tremendously, it is a skill that I've had to work on for the last 8 months personally myself. And I think that is a skill maybe some other people similar to myself might have to work on. I have no real kind of extra comments added to what Luciana has written. I was really taking notes, Luciana. Great reply.
I can add a bit of my personal experience as well, just working from home or from the office and the rest of the team is at home, and you're trying to present something and you can't see anyone's faces. All you see is their letters, their initials, and you're talking to the screen and you have no visual feedback at all. If you say a joke and no one's laughing because everyone's on mute, or you say something very interesting, you just really can't tell. So don't underestimate the importance of showing your face, or even just unmuting once in a while just to ask a question or say that was a great point. It is very appreciated if you are presenting. So I just want to make that comment. And so then let's move on to the next question. Jeff?
Yeah, we got a pretty cool one here from Allie. We're living in a world where there's a lot of non-traditional sources of education. We talk about online platforms like Coursera, EDX, things like that. How much merit or value do employers put on these things? Like, if I don't necessarily have an experience in this field, but maybe I'm out there taking a lot of online courses, etc. Maybe you guys can speak a little bit to how you recognize that, if you do at all.
So you cut out there a little bit in the question. It all kind of came at me all at once there, audio-wise. But what I think I've understood is in the virtual world, do we recognize people who are doing online trainings and keeping their, okay, we got a headshot. Okay, thank you very much for confirming that. To me, I think, so please display that on the resume. I think that's always great things. I think that there are great tools out there. I think of dashboard reporting stuff like Spotfire and Power BI that are coming really big in our industry, more Power BI right now in our industry. And if you do these at-home lessons learned to get familiar with some tools and softwares. Put that on your resume, right? That takes you from, someone you didn't have any exposure to it to now you maybe be an intermediate, or maybe you even got yourself to an advanced. And as long as you're able to speak to it, I think that's always very valuable to add into to the interview process, because it just goes to show your technical competencies as well. And I think a lot of folks will attest to this one. Jeff and Jordan, I look to yourselves as well, being folks who are technically in this world, but learning one software and being familiar in one software does give you an upper hand in kind of learning the next software that you're going to work on, is what we commonly hear. So it's a number of different employers out there might use different types of software out there, but as long as you're familiar with one version, you typically will learn onto the other one. It's just learning the different tools and functionalities and how it works that might be this more struggle.
Fantastic. And Luciana, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Honestly, I never, I'm on Coursera. I do a couple Gale courses. Never really thought about adding them to my resume, but that sounds like a great idea. Even while working for Chevron, there's lots of online kind of certificate learning that you can do. And yeah, I think that's all very relevant, especially if you're learning, new skills, coding, data analytics, that kind of stuff. I'm sure employers love to see that.
To that point, so if I am just learning how to code and I am able to write a Hello World program, should I put that on my resume, or should I have some accomplishments, at least, a paid for course that I completed or a certificate of some sort? What level do you think it's, important to have, or important to mention, or important to not mention?
So if you have a coding world and you're able to do to that level, well, just be prepared. You put it out there in a resume, and you put it out there in the interview process. Be prepared for the follow-up, and be prepared for usually the way I typically do it, and it's not so much me trying to catch a candidate lying about a skill set, but usually I ask the question first of, you wrote that you're familiar with this software on your resume. How would you rank your proficiency? Would it be a beginner, intermediate, and advanced? And depending on the reply, I'll say, oh, so does that mean you know how to do this, 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 and this? And they'll look at me and they'll give me, they'll start talking. And the minute they start saying, well, I've done that, then I'll start asking more follow-up questions. Oh, so you wrote a VBA script. Tell me a little bit more about this script. When you really start understanding a little bit more based off the follow-up replies of how in-depth the person went versus, oh, when I say I wrote that, actually it was my teammate that wrote that. I was the presenter on this. And you're like, okay, so you technically don't have it though, but maybe I should talk to your teammate type of thing. It's kind of the rationale that goes in my mind. But that's just sometimes myself, and I don't mean to be rude about it. It's just sometimes I'm just generally interested in understanding. And that's why I always also caution people what they say is, don't say something if you can't back it.
Excellent. That makes a lot of sense. I'm sure, Luciana, if you have anything else to add to that, but I think I'm sure your answer will be pretty similar. Perfect. Jeff, your hand is up. Do you have a question?
No, I think I was just clapping, but Dilpreet has a question actually.
Dilpreet, go ahead.
Yeah, step up to the plate.
Hey, it's actually not my question. It's actually Mateo's. He was telling me his phone died, or is about to die. It was basically, he just wanted to ask for if we are applying internationally, if either of you have any advice, because I know you guys always say you guys get international resumes. Is there anything that you would suggest that we add onto our resumes if we're applying to other countries, or like internationally, if there's like an international standard that we may not know about?
Perfect. Mateo, we sort of answered that question already. This will be posted on YouTube. Unless there's something more specific in that question that you already answered previously, Robbie and Luciana, feel free to let us know. No, and if not, then Mateo, I'll post this up as soon as we can. And let's get to the next question. We only have about 10 minutes left before I want to let these guys get back to their evening. So, Jeff, who do we have next?
Actually, we're a little bit dry on the chat side.
Okay, no problem. I have a question that came to mind when you guys were when you were talking, Robbie, about your programming experience. This was something that was submitted earlier. Are you able to tell if a candidate is lying about something? A big fish tail, you make themselves look good. If maybe you don't have the knowledge in that topic that they have, but are you able to tell in some cases when people are being untruthful?
So at first, I guess I'm going to say so there is this little riddle or common tale that is always said that when you're interviewing or talking to somebody, if their eyes start floating to the right, they're entering the creative aspect of their brain, which then might give you a little hint that they might be trying to lie. To the interviewer that can pick that up in an interview, I applaud you. You have phenomenal interview skills. I am not at that stage yet. It's 10 years. I'm not there yet. The pieces where I was kind of very similar to my last shot, my last stage, just generally when they tell me some types and they're not able to, I start understanding that there might be things. But I have, it's challenging to determine. That's what an interview is all about, though, is to try to determine what's factual and what's not. That's the job of the interview.
I guess I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Ashley.
During the interview of for the student positions or the new grads, what's the breakdown of technical questions versus kind of personality situational questions? Because I have yet to have a technical interview. It's been 100%, tell me a time you had to deal with a difficult person and how did you resolve it, those types of questions. So what's the breakdown usually of technical versus kind of personality?
So I can't speak to every company, but I'll speak to Chevron. So we typically ask a number of behavioral-based interview questions. It's in relation to what we call We Lead. We Lead has just 4 components on it, what we've understood, and just kind of, I'll spend just maybe a little time here. It's on the result, but what We Lead is supposed to, and how we arrive to the result. That's why we have a lot of behavioral-based questions. But I will say something to yourself, and that is when you get asked, tell me about yourself, or, in the next 5 minutes, give us a quick executive summary of yourself. That, in a way, is the technical aspect of it. That, in a way, is for you to articulate your projects, your work experience, because what you'll end up doing is the other members of the project or the other members of the selection committee, they're going to start asking follow-up questions. Oh, that was really interesting. You did that on that project. Tell me more about that. And that's when you start going to get more technical. That's how I noticed that where our interviews for interns and new grads are. Of course, as you progress your career, interviews start getting more and more technical. So when I look at, for example, a 10-year geologist, 80% of it is technical. And, 2 questions are the behavioral. But the first half of your career, it's definitely a lot more behavioral.
Okay, awesome. Yes, I have heard that about the tell me about yourself. I've heard it's a popular question. Thank you.
Jeff, do you have any more questions in the queue?
Yeah, just maybe we can get some input on cover letters. How long should they be? What should be the important aspects of them? Yeah, just kind of an overview of what both of you think.
I guess maybe I'll start with that. For me, I try to make it really easy on myself. So I take a look at the job posting and I see what the qualifications are. Usually there's something around leadership, usually there's something around teamwork, and perhaps there's something around specific HR skills or systems. I'll take those words, I'll put them in my cover letter, and I'll apply a sentence example. My cover letters are usually, first paragraph, I'm applying for this position, here's my education, this is the day I'm available to start. Middle paragraph, qualifications, and then the end paragraph, I like to just say, thanks for reading this, contact me here and here. And I keep it real simple and short and sweet.
And Robbie, I see a black screen. Maybe his computer timed out. He's supposed to take a 5-minute walk or whatever.
I think we can skip my reply.
5-minute nap.
5-minute nap yet? Just a cat nap.
I have a quick question. How often do you use tools for, I guess, automated like filter tools, I guess, when it comes to resumes and cover letters and things like that? For searching for keywords, etc.
I know exactly what you're asking. It's Luciana and I had a great conversation about this last week, actually. There are certain systems out there that employers rely on to really do their shortlisting, is what it's called. And it's based off keyword searches, typically off the resume. In my previous role to Chevron, it was my job to break those systems, and they have flaws. And we don't have to think very, very hard to figure out what those flaws might be, because we already know what those programs are searching for. So what I'll say is Chevron, there's always a human being behind the computer. There's always a human being doing their first shortlist. That shortlist then gets, we'll take our 500 applicants, we'll get it down to a list of 50, and that list is shared with our selection committee members of 3, and they sit there and they dialogue on it for a couple of hours to identify 6 to 8 candidates to interview, and then we go to interview. It's kind of more how our process is. But I am well familiar with those systems, and in my personal opinion, I do think that they are effective if you don't have that many folks in HR to do your shortlisting, but they also have some big flaws. I'm not sure if the designers of those systems have rectified those flaws that I identified, but that was something in my previous career that I was supposed to do.
That's all pretty interesting. So I shouldn't bother writing keywords in white in 1 pixel font at the bottom of my resume anymore. That doesn't matter. We have a couple more minutes. Unless there's any questions, I have one. Maybe I'll ask this question, and if we have time for one more, we'll get to it. It's sort of a mixed environment now. I think a lot of things are digital. People submit their resumes.
I think we lost you, Jordan, or maybe just me.
No, I lost Jordan, but I could hear you.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like Jordan looks like he's frantically trying to figure out his technology.
Can you guys hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay, I don't know what happened there. We do have a couple more minutes. If there's not any more questions, I have one. I was just curious, paper copy, digital, people have those, a lot of companies have forms that they want you to fill out as well as submit your resume. Back when I was growing up, I loved submitting paper copies with 50-weight paper because it felt a bit better in your fingers. Do you notice any differences between any type of unique resume styles, scenting your resume, putting your portrait on it, having fancy colors? Any advice for anything like that?
So I will start with, a little bit of a interesting resume that I took a look at. I've obviously remembered it to this day. However, I don't remember the name. I just remember that there was a list of kind of qualifications at the top, and one of them said physically fit and attractive. And I still remember that. Don't remember the candidate, but I remember, that resume, and that would definitely be, maybe a don't from me. Never really seen, a different kind of resume that has really stood out in a positive way. It's really easy to catch the ones that stand out in a negative way, for sure.
That's a pretty funny resume. And Robbie, any interesting things that you've seen to do or not do?
Yeah, so I think that the way the world works now, it's digital. In all honesty, it's to go to the company's platforms and their websites and to apply via that. That being said, I still occasionally get folks who drop off resumes at our mailroom, and it gets put into my internal office. And just earlier today, in fact, I went by it and I picked up this resume, and it was a little bit heavier paper, and it was very soft on my fingertips. And I thought to myself, well, we'll just put this on a folder right on my desk. I'll take a look at this maybe later. I don't know what role this person's applied, But in today's day and age to be digital, so eventually I will have to direct that person candidate to go digital. Now, if it's a smaller company, handing off that paper, that weighted paper, maybe with a little cinnamon scent to it, might be the thing that gets through, right? So,
Excellent. Awesome. I think we covered a lot of different topics today, a lot of important tips and recommendations from our wonderful guests. I personally want to thank Roby and Luciana for taking their time today. I hope you guys got a lot out of this. I hope it helps your interview process, your application process. I just want to make note that this is the first of many AMA sessions that we plan on hosting this year. If you guys have any feedback about how this session went, we are learning as we go, and hopefully we hope to get a lot better at it. And if there's any type of content that you want to see as well, feel free to let us know about that. So unless there's any other questions, any closing remarks, I will let Roby and Luciana get on with the rest of their evening. Did I see something in chat there?
Yeah, thank you for joining us tonight. It was awesome, and I know we had fun doing it as well too. So it's always a bonus.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Excellent. Well, with that, I will adjourn our first AMA session of the year. Have a good evening, everybody.
Have a good evening.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.
Mhm.